My name is Zoe Williams, and I'll be the clerk to the subcommittee for today's meeting. As you're aware, the public element of the meeting is being live streamed, and those participating in the meeting have given consent to their inclusion. The recording will be available on the City Corporation's YouTube channel following the meeting. It shall be retained for up to 1 civic year. Whilst we endeavour to live stream all our public meetings, technical difficulties may sometimes prevent live broadcast. In these instances, we aim to upload a recording after the end of the meeting. All personal data will be processed in accordance with the Data Protection Act 2018, and for any further information on that, please feel free to contact us. Chair, item 1, we have received apologies from Anthony Fitzpatrick, David Williams, and Deputy Anne Corbett will be observing online.
Thank you, Town Clerk. And also Joanna's going to be joining us late because of a missed train, and Michael's going to be joining us later. He's had to very sadly euthanatise, is that the right phrase? A pet, euthanise, yeah, a pet, which is very sad. So he's going to be joining us in a bit. Welcome to people online, and welcome to members of the general public joining us online. We're always pleased that you can join us. So, Town Clerk, member declarations.
Thank you, Chair. I am not aware of any unless any members wish to make any now.
Oh, thank you. And then the minutes, it was actually Joanna, the Deputy Chair, that took the meetings which these minutes refer to. We've obviously done wash up and so on from that, but can we take them together for accuracy and matters arising not on the agenda, please? Anybody? No? Okay, happy to approve. Good, thank you very much. Okay, now item 4. Emma Green very sadly has a very sad family issue which she's coping with at the moment. So what we've decided to do is to lift item 4, which was the presentation around the Barbican Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy update, and to put the presentation and the discussion into the next meeting. Emma was going to present, so we wouldn't have had the presentation. Sarah, we've talked about this, and if it's best if people keep comments and so on that they've prepared to when we actually do this. We will do it as a proper presentation and a full item. We didn't want to send it round as email for email responses and so on, because that takes out the responsive nature of it. But I guess if anybody has anything which is absolutely urgent, by which I mean urgent now, that needs to be dealt with under anything, then we could raise it, but my instinct and the instinct of officers was to completely lift it and move it. Is everybody content with that? Thank you. And we're grateful for that, because I know people have prepared some points for that. Okay, and then item 5, I'm going to pass to Sarah, and just for completeness of background, this is for decision page 31 to 46, and this is looking at the final components of the strategic framework. And I think this is the time to say thank you to Sarah and the team for a huge amount of work, and also for being very responsive to the sessions, the discussions that we've had in meetings thus far. And the strategic framework will directly link to that. We've had 1 or 2 comments in about flight path of how we are going to show a consistent moving forward, rather than this is what we are now and then in 6 months this is what we are then, and Sarah is going to address that. And also a question in about link up to the staff network approach. So I suggest we hand over to Sarah and hear Sarah through, and then we'll have a look after that about you know, where we need to move from there. So thank you, Sarah.
Chair, members, I'm pleased to introduce this paper, which outlines the next and the last phase of this kind of planning work to embed a coherent strategic and organisation-wide approach. to EEDI across the whole of City Corporation. It follows your approval in principle of the framework and reflects the extensive engagement, testing and refinement that we've undertaken since then. You'll recall that in September you discussed and approved the theory of change, the maturity matrix and service model, and today we're bringing and wanting to look at and agree the proposed delivery roadmap that takes us from 2026 until 2029, agree annual progress reporting of against the framework to yourselves from 2027-28, feedback on we're asking you for feedback on potential outcome and impact progress metrics and key performance indicators, and then for you to note the proposed work streams in the roadmap. Together, these components form the practical architecture that will enable us to deliver against the corporate plan, people strategy, equality objectives and recommendations from the EEDI review. Since the committee last considered the framework, several developments have strengthened it. So we've had a lot of cross-organisation engagement, departmental SLTs, institutional leadership groups and representatives, as well as staff network leads and sponsors have now been briefed, generating consistent support and providing valuable feedback that has helped us shape the framework. That's all been captured in Appendix 2. It's evidence-led design with insights from external partners, internal diagnostics and staff feedback. That's been integrated throughout and strengthened the credibility and the robustness of the approach. We're confident that the framework provides a clear strategic foundation with a single unifying narrative for EEDI that resonates across the City Corporation. Looking specifically at the roadmap, that's described in the report and illustrated in Appendix 3, that sets out what will happen, when and why across a 4-year horizon. It's grounded in the identification of the 9 core work streams needed to deliver our long-term outcomes. It will be informed in terms of how we approach the work by the maturity assessment that will be conducted with departments, and that will enable us to sequence and also identify the resource requirements. And in all of that, organisational readiness and interdependencies will be crucial. It will help us, the roadmap will support us in making the explicit shift from design to delivery to create impact and achieve our outcomes. Regular reporting will give the EEDI subcommittee visibility of pace, priorities and progress. Following a question in advance, we'd like to see members' input into the exploratory sample measures drafted in Appendix 4. These are the dials that we will look at to see whether our flight path is on course. Insightful metrics are critical, and members' views on what they would want to use to assess the effectiveness of the framework are very much wanted. And our first package of work in implementing the roadmap will be finalising those metrics, so it's very clear what we're measuring ourselves against. In terms of networks, they are a key enabler of equality, diversity and inclusion in the organisation, and we've created a refreshed approach which forms a central part of our framework, and that's in our connection and culture pillar. You'll see that work stream, and this includes a clearer corporation-wide definition and purpose for networks, a more consistent governance and operating model, stronger support including executive sponsorship and baseline resourcing, and a pathway to embed lived experiences more systematically in decision making. This responds directly to insights gathered from the multiple engagement sessions with network co-chairs and leads across all 8 networks. And again, in response to the question we received in advance, I want to draw attention to where the networks are now and what our approach will be to deliver. Currently, staff networks are really doing fantastic work. Often that's invisible and undervalued and fills gaps which aren't theirs to fill. They could be sometimes described as the 4th emergency service, and where they've been asked to contribute in the past, they've been asked to influence training, policy or activity. That's been relatively ad hoc. The network approach we propose protects staff networks' lead time, brings greater recognition of their efforts, as well as clearer boundaries so that network leads can refer some of what lands to them to the relevant colleagues. Engagement with policy and training, etc., will be systematic, and staff networks' influence and input will be visible and supported to influence products and services. And whilst we have been talking about the strategic framework for the future, I wanted to kind of share with the committee that things are not static. Things have already begun. we've established, so it's just these are just some of the examples of things that are already happening. We've already established a rhythm of marking dates in our diversity calendar with regular articles published on our SharePoint with typically 400 plus views. We've updated the EEDI induction and e-learning in collaboration with learning and development colleagues, and that's mandatory now and live for all new starters, and it contains corporation specific content, case examples, scenario specific content. It has stronger guidance on inclusive behaviours and allyship, and is more integrated in terms of EEDI principles and streamlined learning. We're collaborating with HR to improve the inclusion focus of the all cross-organisation staff survey, and the support we've provided following the Supreme Court judgment clarifying the definition of sex in the Equality Act, including co-production of supportive guidance, has demonstrated the consultation and coaching approach that we will implement. And later this month, the EDI with the Social Mobility Network are collaborating again with the Sutton Trust with a lunch and learn on the impact of accent bias. And members are obviously very welcome to be part of that on the 26th of February. These are all important indicators that the framework is already enabling action. So as the chair recognised, this marks a significant milestone. It brings together the design work the subcommittee has overseen, incorporates a substantial feedback from the corporation, and sets us on a clear evidence-led organisation-wide journey. I welcome your questions and ask you to specifically recognise the actions and points for decision. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah, thank you very much. Just to remind members that we're looking at the Supreme Court judgment later in the meeting, and also member learning and development in item 7. So if we can park those out of any questions, discussions raised for this now. And recommendations are on page 32, which is really the focus for this item, which is to agree the proposed delivery roadmap, agree annual progress on the reporting setup, feedback on potential outcome and impact progress metrics, and to note the proposed work streams in the delivery roadmap. So that's what we're asked to focus on today. So fire away, James, first. Yeah.
I've got one question, but it might lead to a supplementary possibly, which is just thinking about how this applies across corporation and then institutions, given some of the institutions are clearly quite well advanced on programs, that it's, I don't know, Barbican City Police, whatever else it is. So I just want to get an understanding of how it comes together. Thank you.
So a lot of what we've done has been very much designed on what the Barbican's already done, and has been informed and co-created with the Barbican GSM and GSMD and City Bridge specifically, because they all have embedded EDI teams. We've identified that we will work in a federated model. So we here in the centre will create organisation-wide standards and kind of indications of what's needed, and then where they have embedded teams, they will take that forward in their local environment. Where there aren't embedded teams, we will work more directly with them to build that. So it very much should mean that we get the best of central direction and local insight and what's local relevant, what's relevant locally.
If I may, a supplementary. And sorry, do you include City Police within that? But the more substantive one is, therefore, will you measure it at a sort of both corporation and sort of institutional level in terms of where the organisation is?
Yes, that would be the intention.
Good, thank you. Anybody else? No, I think people are very happy. Well done, Sarah. Excellent. Yes, go on, Charles.
I think it's excellent. I suppose, part of this is all about sort of the development of culture and embedding culture, and with it, I always put the two C's together, culture and communications. And I don't see necessarily anything around sort of the broader strategic communications. It's embedded in everything we do in terms of the engagement one-on-one and so on and so forth. But I just wondered if there is going to be a sort of broader strategic communications program attached to this.
Yes, very much so. What our intention is to create some user-friendly communication products that have got nice graphic design that helps to communicate communicate some things that are more complicated in writing more easily. And we will definitely create a strategic communication plan. We actually have what we call a TC Live on 2nd of March, where EEDI is going to be a significant item on that agenda to talk to the organisation about this. And we've had sort of regular-ish intranet articles, but yeah, we need, now that we are clear on where we are and what our direction of travel is, we will definitely be doing, you know, a ongoing communications.
Great. I would strongly encourage that.
This links to the, yes, sorry, Diana, I was just going to say it links to the idea of the flight path, which I think is really, really important, so that we are really responsive and not reactive to anything that you know, comes the way along that journey. I think that's really important. Dion. So.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to add, in terms of the TC Live, and for those unaware, that's the invitation to all staff. You normally have around 4,000, several hundred in person, the rest online, that this is featuring, subject to the agreement of this committee about the topics that Sarah has just outlined. So that's kind of the big bang. We're really conscious of the fact that often when we talk to staff about EEDI, it's because something's gone wrong. And this is actually something to celebrate, and the progress that we have done. So we are really showcasing it and pushing this hard alongside, and this is really important, alongside conversations around our Ambition 25, people strategy and financial climate that we're operating in, because we want to put EDI on the same footing as equally important as those other things. So that's why we've got the event on the 2nd of March, and that's why this is going to feature very heavily. The only other thing I was going to mention, I know we've got an update on city belonging later on in the agenda, but Sarah and the team have been working really closely. Although we've talked a lot about internally, we're conscious that the impact is felt externally. So the connections with our city belonging groups, with other industries and so on, that's all baked into this work. Thank you.
And that's a very good segue into the next item. If everybody's happy to approve item 5.
Sorry, one more question then. Apologies. So you've also got the TC Live event on the 2nd or whatever else. What about member engagement around this as well? Yeah.
So part of the item that we've got next is about member training. So that's definitely what. So I think there's different levels, isn't there? What skills and knowledge do we need members to have? And then I guess what it'd be really useful to get from this committee. What are the broader ways that we should be engaging with members?
I think, yeah, we can bring this up under item 7, but I think what James is getting at is more member inclusion rather than member learning. And there is something to be said for whatever events are going on, for members on the committee to be invited and what, you know, sort of almost worry about the role or the part they play after. I think it's the feeling of inclusion with those things, which is often very helpful, I think, at events. Yes.
You're reading my mind. I just think, you know, with all this work and you know, it's great to with colleagues, but actually, you know, is there an opportunity for members to be, you know, on that call, for instance?
Specifically on the TC Live, no. That is a specific decision taken by the town clerk because it's with staff for staff. So we don't invite members to the all staff events. However, we will take away that wider point of where we can have opportunities with members and officers and to communicate to members and have that inclusivity point.
Before I bring Edward in, I'm thinking of something I instituted in education and open spaces, natural environment, which is on every public agenda, and Zoe does this for us now with Epping Forest, is you produce a list of all the events and they're colour banded as to whether they're all members, some members, officers, whatever, but everybody knows everything that is going on, and then there's asterisks or whatever method is used to say open to everybody and who you need to contact. And it's a very easy way of doing it. And if it's updated for the agenda in every meeting, then I think it keeps members informed. Some of the things they're included, some, as Dion said, they're not. But I think it's a way of informing regardless of that. And once the grid is set up, it's relatively easy to do because you just add things.
I mean, that sounds like an excellent idea, and definitely we can do that. And I also wonder when we get to the Emma's item, whether actually there's a lot of opportunity there for there to be the crossover between.
Well, Zoe does this for me, don't you? So in the other,
No,
with Jules in the other committees. So yeah, good. Now, Edward.
I'm just wondering if the town clerk does TC live for staff. Yeah, should there be a balancing exercise, which is policy chair live, who can do something similar addressing members?
James.
Well, I'm not going to respond to that, but I'm going to pick up on where we're going. And the reason I was raising it, it's look, I just reflect on a number of other organisations I'm involved with, and actually, it's the norm actually to involve in those organisations and NEDs with the organisation on things like this. And I just find it's like, and obviously, the town clerk, it's not here to sort of respond to it, but I just think we should think about it. We're trying to build. I would hope a cohesive organisation. I find it just, particularly on something like this, where we're talking about inclusivity and everything else, that we don't have that opportunity. I mean, it goes back to I think where you were going, Caroline, which is we should perhaps just give some more thought on what are those things where we should bring people together, because I think that's how you build teams. Actually, thank you.
Can I suggest we pick it up again at wash up when people might have had ideas going through their mind, and then we can just tease out what we think may be the best way of doing this. I mean, that's a very specific example, but I think the generality is I'm all in favour, with an education background, of knowledge being powerful, and if people know, they don't feel excluded. And I think it's as simple as that quite often.
And Chair, just to add, one quick action we can take is the newsletter, I know it's not called that comes out to all members from the town clerk about what is happening or has happened. We can absolutely put in a feature around this work where it's got to what the decisions have been of this committee, so that all members get it at the same time in the intervening period. One thing I would say, lots of organisations do it differently. However, civil servants, local government, they do have very clear events where it's just the officers, just the members, and then where they bring them together. I think some of this is also informed, although it happened previously, but it was informed and reinforced from the findings from the EDI review on trying to build that culture. I completely agree on the inclusion, but also having those spaces both for officers and members where they can bring out issues in a way that is helpful. So I think there's a rationale behind it, but we absolutely will take it away. But think about where some of the quick wins are, like
just play with it. Yeah.
So just come back on that. Yeah, just so I do get that, but if I think about the work the City of London Police have done, that does bring together in a single environment. And actually, I think it's been incredibly successful having members present at some of those events. Now, I get that you should look at ones where you might want to do some separate groups, but in a way, I would almost say the default should be to bring people together around this stuff, because actually, otherwise you risk doing a lot of really good work around the organisation, but you don't have a really important sort of group on board or necessarily understand what's going on. Anyway, I've said my bit. Thank you.
Sorry, Edward first, and then back to Sarah, I think.
Yeah,
Edward.
I want to echo what James has said, and I think at times there is too much of a separation. To the extent that members don't always understand where staff are in their thoughts, and indeed staff don't understand where members are. And I think for too long there's probably been an impression amongst our workforce that members don't care about EEDI issues. And I think we need to find a way of demonstrating that is not the case, and having members in the room when these things are talked about. And I go back to that very challenging period around the death of George Floyd and the rise of Black Lives Matter, and the staff meetings, which all happened online, of course, to which I was invited as chair of what is now the Corporate Services Committee, which had responsibility for EEDI at the time. And I attended, Catherine McGuinness as policy chair attended, and it was incredibly helpful for us to hear the pain that was being expressed by staff colleagues. But we also got feedback that it was hugely appreciated that we as senior members were in fact there, we were listening, we were participating, and we were taking things on board. And I think there's a real risk if we do everything in isolation, that actually, we'll see a split between members and officers, and that's the last thing on earth we need.
Yes, so Sarah, to close up, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to solutionize right now, because clearly there's a lot of things to think about, but we have a communication and connection pillar in the EEDI strategy. And one of the things that we are developing is a best practice forum, and it may be, which will be about the exchange of best practice across the organisation, thinking about whether members should be, how members should be in that. Sorry, I thought it was you.
Sorry,
it's definitely something we can think about, and I think so I really get the sense of what you're talking about, and it's about how we create different forums that allow different avenues for staff and officers and members to communicate with each other. So I think under that pillar we can think about how for EEDI specifically we create that opportunity.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I've been contemplating whether or not to say anything at this point, but I did want to raise something I was going to raise at the next point for the next item, which is on behalf of Deputy Nigat Qureshi, who's the CPF board member.
Yes.
What she's talked about is around one of the points she wanted to raise is around member engagement, and she proposed exploring whether or not member engagement could be more visible. So it's chimes with what has been said already. What she talked about was through some form of KPI acknowledgement of participation. But I think the point she's trying to raise was the point that's been raised here as well. And I think she just wanted me to reflect that as part of this.
I agree. Discussion. Yes, and done. Thank you very much. Yes, and Sarah has that copy email from NICAT. Yeah. Good. So I think those are points really, really well worth making, which Sarah will take on board. So actually items 6 and 7, as we've already heard, do overlap with that as well. So I'm sure some of these points will be made again. But Siobhan, I think you are going to do the verbal report on city belonging.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We are really pleased for the opportunity to provide now regular updates on the City Belonging Project to the subcommittee. In the spirit of not assuming prior knowledge, the City Belonging Project is a City of London Corporation initiative that was launched in 2023. This sits within the campaigns and community engagement function, and we aim to create a more inclusive square mile by strengthening connections between city workplaces, their staff networks, and the wider community. In 2024, we launched the first of what has now grown to 12 different city belonging networks, serving particular communities, which spans across ethnicities, religions, different interest areas. We are also planning on launching 2 additional networks this year, which will be for Christians and parents and carers. Right now, we have more than 5,000 workers who signed up for the program across 500 different workplaces. And these individuals receive our newsletter with a regular programming of events which happen across the square mile. To give you a sense of the breadth of what goes out, last week's edition included events which covered Ramadan, Purim, LGBTQ plus History Month, Women's History, and wellness programming. Our own events received about 200 signups within the first hour of the newsletter hitting inboxes. So there is a big demand for spaces for people to connect. We are continuing to work with partners across the square mile using our convening power to join up dots across the community and support those who are already doing great impactful work. Looking forward, we will be launching our Belonging Champions program later this year, which aims to establish a single point of contact at every city business. And this will give us a streamlined and trackable way of communicating with occupiers, which allows us to more effectively run our campaigns, consultations, and other civic engagement activities. On member engagement, we have aimed to secure member champions for each of our networks, which helps support and champion the work that they're doing. Not every network has one, so if you think this sounds like exciting work, please let me know. I welcome any questions that you may have. Thank you for recognizing the importance of this work.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. I'm sure we will have questions and input here. Personally, very, very pleased to see the inclusion of Christianity in the city belonging. That seemed, as I've made the point a number of times, seemed to be a strange exclusion to me. So that's very good. And I think member champions would excite people, I think. But anyhow, enough from me. Comments from anyone else? Joanna, then James. Joanna first, Deputy Chair, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the update. That was brilliant. I was just really in relation to something that was raised at the last EDI sub in relation to faith in the city. And I wonder if that intersects with or falls under the work that you're doing, which I assume it does. And it was just some of my questions around if we'd made relationships or started to make some inroads with some of the schools in relation to their I guess some of the students' feedback around the capabilities of staff and teachers within the schools to discuss some of the challenges that they have that are related to their faiths.
So Faith in the City is another initiative which sits underneath the City Belonging Project. Hopefully at the next meeting, we'll have a bigger update for you, but just to know that that project is going forward with pursuing funding to ensure that that we can do that work. On the schools point, I would love to pick that up separately because I don't know if that's been raised before. I haven't heard it, but it would be great to see if there's something we could do together.
I think the place to have that discussion would be through the Education Strategy Unit. So Deborah Bell is the person to get in contact with first off and then go from there. So James.
Thank you. Really helpful update. I think it's a really important programme. I've got sort of probably just two questions. One is fairly straightforward. Just on the sort of the member leads, member involvements, it'd just be useful to see what those areas are actually, and indeed who the members are. And should just think about how we, encourage others to volunteer, because again, would absolutely support that. Second piece for me is, look, I think City Belonging has now been up and running for a period, and it's felt a little bit that's sort of grown organically. It's not a criticism, it's just an observation. I suppose, is there a sort of view of where we want it to be in a 1 to 3 year time frame, recognizing that some of this is potentially constrained by resources and all those other bits and pieces, but it'd be really useful for me, and apologies if it is out there, but just to see where City Belonging wants to be in a 3 year time frame. Thank you.
Yeah, James, I actually raised it with officers as part of item 7, member learning and development, because I think there is an ignorance around how, because it has grown organically and hugely successfully, do we need to formalise a process where people actually know about it? And yes, with the member champions, I think it's how do people volunteer? How do they get allocated? What happens if you have a whole bunch of members that fancy being linked to a particular area? How do you go about that? Or has it been a bit ad hoc at the moment? And if so, what your plans are for moving forward? I think probably everyone would be asking that.
I will try. I won't take these in order, actually. I'll just answer them in the way that makes sense. Thank you, Chair. So on champions, you're absolutely correct. It's been ad hoc. It has been members that have come forward at the launch of a network and said, I'd really like to get involved. What can I do? And those people have been made the champion of their network. What I can do is I can send around the networks which don't yet have champions, if that would be helpful. But I think going forward, yes, we probably need some sort of more formal process in which we allocate people.
I think, can I... Yes, and can I suggest that we do it in some sort of formalised way, because it is something that has come from committee. So rather than it just appearing ad hoc around members, as you might like to know this, can officers sort of come up with a proposal, check it out with me and the deputy chair to say, this is what we're proposing sending around members, and then make it clear who's linked at the moment, areas that aren't linked, what the ask is, and what new opportunities might be coming up. I think they could all be together. It still doesn't need to be very long, but I think to slightly formalise it, particularly on behalf of the committee, we need, and it probably needs to go out in that case from the town clerk, so that it comes out as information from the committee and to come back to the committee, whichever officer then picks it up afterwards. But that would be very good, I would have thought.
Yep.
And any other questions on that there? I know, again, I've already said this is going to be picked up to a certain extent in item 7. So should we move on to item 7? I think these are quite free flow. And as I said earlier, one of the things that I had already raised with officers at call over was how city belonging could be fed into the member learning and development programme, because it's the topic of it itself is a natural extension of what we might want members to know is available, and will take them forward in their knowledge. Because I think you'd be very surprised, you know, if members aren't directly involved, members see this information popping up but don't necessarily see it as something they respond to or get involved with. If we can take the report as read, the report, page 47 to 64 is the item. I also need to say that if you, 3 or 4 of us, I think, not everyone here today, sit on member learning and development. So if you have already made points there, they don't need to be made again here unless you want to make them for information for everybody else here. But the key thing here is the added value, really the feedback from the perspective of this particular committee, this particular group of people, a steer to officers about the approach. Do we want the approach to be sort of somewhat didactic and objective, like this is really what people need to know, or do we want it to be much more synoptic and much more embedded into everything that happens with member learning and development, so that we've talked already this meeting about change of culture and change of thought process, so that it's there embedded in everything which is done, in which case an officer, particularly from EDI, needs a seat at the table of member learning and development, and for it to be much more driving the process. And we did something similar with our new education strategy, where EDI and environmental education is actually delivered like that. But it does need everybody to be on the ball, because you can't silo it and pass it over to one particular group or person. So those are the kinds of areas where I think the officer team are really looking at for a steer. So over to members. I know Jerome's got some comments from NIGAT again, I think, on this, so if we come to those a bit later. But anybody else want to start us off? Deputy Chair? Sorry. Sarah or Dion, did you want to come in? No, all right. Deputy Chair, do you want? No, okay. Jerome, do you want to give NIGAT's points?
Yeah, so the members, and thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to say this as well. NIGAT has strongly expressed concern about that the current model might not reach those members who need the training the most, or might benefit from it. And in that context, she suggested consideration of whether or not it might be proportionate or a proportionate mandatory element of this be added to the mechanism, just to signal the seriousness of the corporation's commitment to the agenda. She also asked whether or there was scope to review how previous member learning programs have been incorporated in practice and what lessons might be learned from them as well. And she just felt that the understanding of the impact of earlier programs could help inform future design.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to come to the Chief in a second, because obviously the Chief is intimately involved in this programme. I think reach is always very difficult because people are very busy and there's a huge number of training and information programs that come through at the moment, and people's access to them is well, I find it's just extraordinarily difficult to attend all of the ones that you think you should attend, and then you get them through recorded and it's still difficult to find time at midnight or 5 o'clock in the morning to actually look at those. So I think reach is always important. A good example is when we did a whole survey, which other members probably remember as well, about chairman's skills after a phase where people are somewhat critical, should we say, of people's chairmanship skills. So a whole programme was set up, and the same 2 or 3 of us went to all of them, and actually the people that you were trying to target, without naming any names, didn't. So I think reach is hugely important, and perhaps officers can come back in a bit about that. I think the mandatory was something that we also looked at coming out of that and running into Liz Vane, and mandatory programs are also very, very difficult when you're essentially dealing with a volunteer force, which is what members are. And so we did look at, for example, as people become deputy chair, but before they come chair, should people have to do that training programme? But the fact that everybody is volunteers makes it quite difficult to then impose something that blocks a route. If you're being voted for in a democratic sense by a committee, it's not the same as a professional training capacity. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but that was the point that we got to before. So I'd be interested, and I'm saying that before the chief because the chief is at the rock face of this now, and I might be a bit behind the curve. So Chief, can we go to you next?
Yes, it's just on the member learning and development area. I mean, we have that, I think it's within the portal anyway, the link into this. Like all these things, I'm not sure how many people go to the portal in the first place, let alone click on this area that is very necessary. But certainly when we're meeting on Monday, I think next for member development, we'll highlight it again there. And in my next bulletin, I have a monthly bulletin. Again, I don't know if anyone reads that anyway, but we'll put that in the link as well back to this training area on that. So that's that from a member development point of view. I mean, back to the belonging networks. It seems to me that a lot of the big companies are connected in terms of the different networks. But, you know, given that we're 90% SMEs out there, I don't think, as far as I know in my ward, I don't know what has been the mechanism for reaching out to all the other constituent parts in different wards in terms of, you know, even companies with 2 or 3 people in them would still like to know that these networks exist. And how can we as members promote that within our wards? Has that happened and I've missed out on that? Or maybe you can tell me.
If we go to Siobhan first about that, and then I'm going to bring Isaac in to say 1 or 2 details about some of the other points that you've raised. So Siobhan, do you want to answer the city belonging?
Yes, one of the reasons we started City Belonging Project was to give people who work in SMEs a place to connect with others who work in the city because they don't have ERGs in their own businesses. The program has really grown organically, but I will say we do have a lot of participation from people who work at quite small workplaces. We haven't gone out in a systematic way and gone line by line by line, but that is part of what City Belonging Champions is meant to do, in which we will be sending out material to every single workplace in the city, looking for them to appoint a champion who can make sure that everyone in their workplace knows about City Belonging, knows about the events that are happening, and knows how to connect in. But if there are specific businesses in your ward that you think we should connect with, we'd be really happy to do that.
Well, I'm writing an email to all our constituents in the next week or so, and it'd be worthwhile having a link in that they can, you know, press the button.
Thank you. And just, has it gone into the ward newsletters? The link it has. Good.
It's in the annual report.
Yeah. Good. Good. Okay. Isaac, anything on the, I should have brought you in at the beginning, anything on the sort of more factual side of the report? Then I'm going to go to the Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair. For me, one thing I did want to highlight from the report was the member engagement aspect. So one option we did propose in the paper was a short light touch survey to all members. So it was discussed at call over yesterday, the idea of it not just being from this subcommittee, a member development and standards subcommittee, but we want all members, especially as we've got new membership on the court since the elections last year. We want all members to have an input into what EDI training would look like. So we were talking about the possibility of a training needs survey, perhaps like a Microsoft form or something. We'd look for the subcommittee's view on that.
Okay, so any thoughts on that either in this meeting or by email, presumably?
Yep.
Follow up.
Happy for anyone to follow up. In terms of as well what was raised earlier about mandatory training, currently the only mandatory training I'm aware of is planning and code of conduct. And that's because they're statutory requirements. Licensing as well, yeah. But we can strongly recommend members to undertake training, but unless there's a sort of legal precedent, I'm not aware of whether we can force.
I think there might be other things that are perhaps more important that we want to give a steer on coming out of this meeting rather than going down that route again, knowing that we've done it and that really it's at its best with anything like with boards of governors, things that are statutory that you have to do. But let's come back to that. I've got Deputy Chair and then Edward.
Thank you, Chair. It was just, I'm sort of conscious of not going too off piece, but I wonder in relation to that element of overwhelm when it comes to the amount of maybe training that, you know, we're seeing people are struggling to get to based on their time and things, if it would be worth having more bespoke development plans for members. So considering something specifically, so, you know, each person that becomes a member looking at what their ambitions are, for example, during their time in their term, and then maybe being a bit more bespoke. So rather than going to lots of things, you've got a plan that, you know, you've got a development plan that means you're actually developing in your role as councillor, and therefore they're quite bespoke. I think that combined with what we spoke about yesterday in relation to having a bit more input from members about what that training looks like, if people may feel that there's a more effective use of time, if they think they directly benefit in some way from attending that and it leads them to their next place, to the chair's point around, you know, being a deputy chair, going to chair, if you have ambitions for that, then you probably should be at the, you know, the training around chairmanship. So I wonder if that's.
No, I think that is a good point. That's probably for the chief to pick up actually in member terms, which I'll say in all seriousness. And then I'm thinking of our next chief, where he'd have us out on the golf course, learning how to play golf. But that was a joke, by the way. Please don't anybody take that wrongly. But I think that sits within the chief commoner initially. So perhaps, Chief, if you could think on that and speak to your next chief commoner. Is he elect as yet? Do we call him chief commoner elect? Then I think that is something, that bespoke idea is something that I think would help, because it could cluster training into different opportunities and possibilities, couldn't it? So Edward next.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. You indicated that you thought that training needs to be mandatory where there is a statutory duty. Well, there is. It's Section 149 of the Equality Act, and it's the Public Sector Equality Duty. This institution, and indeed all of its members, are required to have due regard to eliminate unlawful discrimination, advance equality of opportunity and foster good relations. And I suspect that actually some of our members don't know that that is a statutory duty, and they have to consider it whenever they are taking decisions on behalf of the authority. So I would not be opposed to there being at least some light touch mandatory training on EDI issues.
So that's that. Can I bring James in first and then you, or Charles, go on then.
I mean, I was just going to, I'm delighted to hear that, Edward, because I have an instinctive view, and it wasn't based upon the Act, that we should be doing this.
So
I think we should be making a virtue of it.
What I'd written down in,
it's an opportunity in the world in which we live, with all that's happening. I think the cool is the anti-cool, and we are exactly that as an organisation. So I personally have an instinct, and it should be light touch, and it can be made to be interesting and fun and so on and so forth, not mandatory training as we often dread. And it can be done on the screen and effective. But I would generally encourage it.
very useful intervention. And please members tell me if I'm wrong, I've got kind of 3 conclusions in terms of what we're asked to do, which is to give a steer back in terms of how we would like this to operate. One is the statutory. So we need one approach to the statutory training. 2 is the more thematic, synoptic, embedding EDI in all training that happens for members. Very, very, very rarely do you get anything, to Edward's point, that should be separate from that. And the 3rd thing is the particular member aspects that would perhaps come under the chief's remit. So those 3 things in terms of an overall steer. James.
Thank you, sir. I sort of come in on that latter point, and it slightly links into where the deputy chair was going to some extent. It's been raised in formal court a number of times, including by myself, which is, look, we're an organisation which is run by committees or boards or whatever else, but we don't ever do, or very rarely, if there are in places, essentially board effectiveness.
No, we don't.
And there are 2 components to this. One is, why aren't we doing, an annual assessment of chairs and deputy chairs of committees? Because through that you can provide feedback.
Absolutely.
And individuals sometimes may not know where they need some of that sort of member development. And I really do think, and it is perhaps for the chief to pick up. We can do it quite light touch, but I just think it would make us a more effective organisation.
And the chief wants to comment, but do you want to comment first? Let James finish, then Edward can comment, and then the chief can come in. James.
And the second part of that, and actually I have done it in 1 or 2 of the boards within the city, is again, all good boards should be doing very high level sort of skills audit, and actually through the skills audit people can identify what they know and don't know as well, and that might also link back to that more tailored approach to training. Anyway, I really do think it is the sort of moment to grip it, chief, before you step down.
Yeah, then Edward, and then we'll pass to the chief for final comment.
It's simply anecdotally, when I chaired establishment, I did in fact do a committee effectiveness review, including an assessment of my own performance as chair, and I did it halfway through my 3 years. It was really helpful for me, but it was bitterly opposed by a whole group of other senior members, who thought that it was entirely improper, and that chairmen were elected and therefore they should just get on with it. They didn't need feedback. I'll let you guess which of our most senior members was particularly opposed to it.
I wouldn't dare. But I mean, from a background of education, whether, if you're a senior leader or on a board, chair or deputy chair of a board, then this is normal practice. So I think it is something that, charities quite often now, it's normal practice, since some real problems with charity governance, really hit the headlines. So I don't think we're saying anything abnormal, but Chief, you can see your workload increasing and your training programme for the next chief.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll tee it up beautifully for my successor. But it's human nature. There are a group of members who, when I send out my messages on training, say, you've got no right to tell me I should be trained. They take offence. Yeah, they've got, and apart from, and then I say, well, actually, some of the things are statutory and you need to do it. But and they say, well, okay, tell me about those, but I don't want to be trained on anything else. And there are some people like that.
Yes, I mean, apart from the statutory, I think the angle has to be, I want to be the best that I can be. And there shouldn't be anybody that's signed up to the Nolan principles that doesn't want to be the best that they can be. So I think that's probably going to be the angle. to go in on. But officers, I hope you've enjoyed that conversation amongst us. Does that give enough of a steer? Isaac, I'm particularly looking at you there, but also Sarah and others involved. Is that enough of a steer in terms of from members? Isaac?
Yeah, for me, that's been really helpful. I've noted down all of the recommendations and we can discuss them at member development standards next week. And I know we've got a few members here.
Oh, goodness, you were very
here
polite.
again.
Well done, Isaac.
So yeah, thank you.
Good. Okay, so moving on to item 8, the annual equalities update. This is Helena, and fairly straightforward, I think, for information, but Helena.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. I wanted to update the subcommittee on the annual equalities information report so that members are aware of the work being done, the requirements we're working to, and the next steps. The annual equalities information report is a statutory requirement, picking back up on statutory, under the public sector equality duty, which means the City Corporation must publish clear, accessible information each year about our workforce and our service users across the protected characteristics. Our report must be published by the end of March. The report is in later stages of development, but not yet ready to share. As in previous years, HR workforce data and service user data from DCCS is processed by the performance team within corporate strategy and performance. The performance team adds significant value through producing visuals and integrating with external comparator data for the City of London, for London, and also England and Wales, where available. EDI then use that information to create the report, which closely follows the structure and content of previous years. The output will be a detailed report which captures the equalities data for the snapshot of 31st of March 2025, and for some service user groups where appropriate, the dataset uses academic year, for example, for adult learners. What I want to flag is that the equalities information report is produced for its specific statutory purpose. It's not yet a tool for decision making. The data required is annual, and the lag between the snapshot dates, the production, and the application to decision is too long for operational purposes, and other sources of data are used for that instead. As we speak, the equalities information report has gone through EEDI internal checks and has gone to the data owners for their checks before being seen by the Chief Strategy Officer and then on to SLT in a few weeks. I would like to share the report with the subcommittee by correspondence ahead of the March deadline for publication. As a reminder, it's a legal requirement and publishes factual information, so will come full information to you. That said, the equalities information report could have more value as an internal or maybe even an external communications tool and a source of potential inquiry for future EEDI areas of focus, or better illuminate our workforce and service user data through narrative and potentially connect to staff network activities, to department work and institution works too, so we could have a far more holistic view of the qualitative as well as the quantitative. Following publication, I'd like to prepare a report with recommendations for further development for your consideration later this year. And I do note that last year you saw improvements in terms of intersectional analysis, which is not currently available to us this year. However, with HR system changes, I would work to present that in the next year's report. And so to summarise, the annual equalities information report is legally mandated, it's being carefully coordinated, bringing together multiple sources of diversity data. Its purpose is to provide the public with a transparent, comprehensive and accessible account of the City Corporation's workforce and service user demographics. And we will be delivering it to deadline, sharing it with the subcommittee and suggesting a discussion item later in this year.
Thank you, Helena, very much. So when do you think it will be ready to share?
To share with this committee?
Yeah.
I'd be looking at kind of mid-March.
Okay, and will you be able to produce an executive summary with
Absolutely.
that? Good, excellent. And then into the autumn, it will go on to the agenda to discuss in terms of development recommendations coming out of that.
Yes, please.
Okay, so that's the 3 elements. Anyone, any other questions on that? James?
So look, I understand where we are this year, and I've got the sense we're going to look at what the process is for next year if I understood that correctly, because I think, yeah, there is a deadline, it is statutory, all of that, but it's also a really important document. It's out there, it's public facing, And I just think we should have the right opportunity just to sort of input and shape it. It's in a similar way that we do with some of the statutory reports for police and things like that. Yes, there's certain stuff you've got to report, but I just think we will get sight of it ahead of it being published, but not in any way that, quite frankly, would leave any time to influence, what's in it or anything else. So I just think I would just urge us to look at that process so that we can help shape what is, an important statutory doc. Thank you.
Point well made. Thank you. Anybody else with that? No, good. Thank you. So that was verbal report for information. I haven't had any questions in advance or any other business. Jerome, have we answered NIGAT's questions now in full? I think we have, haven't we?
Yes, Joe, just to be clear, you have. I think there was one aspect of the point that she wants to raise as well, just for recognition. She just wanted to remind the members of this committee about the diversity charter.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
As well. And she wondered whether or not there's any merit in reviewing that and its relevance.
So, Sarah, diversity charter.
I think that as we implement the framework, looking at all the existing aspects, seeing which ones are still fit for purpose, which one needs adjusting, or perhaps, something.
So I think the question would be, which would probably answer NIGAT at the moment, is what is the process going to be for member input into the recrafting of that? Is that right, James?
Can I just add one thing that's actually listed? I was pondering this earlier because I think it is really good just to do it to a refresh. But go back to the training point. Quite frankly, people who sign up to it ought to be people who have done the training, if that makes sense. So you could sort of link the two. Thank you.
A number of these things today are linking together, I think, and that's another facet of that, and almost the process by which we go about it is indicative of our attitude of including people in it. So I think they do link up. So can we leave that with you, please? Anybody, anything else? So that was the only thing I had in advance. Dion.
Thank you, Chair, and sorry for not mentioning in advance, but I just had a ping reminder that given this committee is meeting now, and it was referenced earlier, that LGBTQ plus History Month, just to acknowledge that it is the month. We have got EDI committee meeting. A massive shout out to the staff and our stakeholders and partners who are celebrating this month and encouraging increased awareness, and just wanted to put it formally for your AOB for the committee. Thank you.
Absolutely noted formally, and thank you very much everybody for your work and your input. Really transformative and forcing cultural change, I think. Anybody, anything else? No, good. Thank you very much. Thank you to, we haven't excluded the public yet. We better exclude them first and then.
Thank you, Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed to exclude the public.
Right, agreed, done. So thank you very much to all members of the general public for listening. We do really appreciate your support and the work many of you are doing in this area. Thank you, Town Clerk.
Thank you, members. Please wait while we stop the live stream.